one of our best-known national parks. Mount Rainier, located about 50 miles from Puget Sound in the state of Washington. On Mount Rainier, we look out over the ridges and valleys of the Cascade Range. These high mountains form a wall or barrier to the westerly winds that blow from over the Pacific Ocean. They bring warm, moist air to the cool land. The moist air turns into clouds that float into the mountain valleys. As the clouds are forced higher, they drop their moisture as snow or rain. The Pacific Northwest has an unusual climate. The summers are cool and the winters are mild. And it has a greater amount of rainfall than any other part of the United States. If we were to explore a mountain carefully, we should see that plant and animal life change as we travel upwards. We shall see this change on Mount Rainier. From sea level up to about 4,500 feet is the zone of forests. From this level up to about 6,500 feet is the zone of meadows. And from this level up to the very top is the zone of ice and snow. Let us explore these life zones, starting with the zone of ice and snow, where there is very little plant or animal life. Here, the great thickness of snow, collected over the centuries, has formed rivers of ice, known as glaciers. They have been gnawing at the sides of the mountain since the Ice Age, many thousands of years ago. There are 26 glaciers on Mount Rainier, of which 11 are fairly large. Nisqually is one of the best examples of the larger glaciers. Starting from the snow very slowly down the mountainside. The broadly curved cracks prove that the ice moves faster in the center than at the sides. The glacier becomes wider as it moves down its path, and the cracks become long. An open crack such as this one is called a crevasse. It may reach down more than 100 feet because most glaciers are several hundred feet thick. This zone of eternal winter covers almost half the mountain. Mountain climbers are tied to one another with strong rope for reasons of safety. They must use an ice axe with which to chop steps in the ice and to feel beneath the snow for a possible hidden crevasse. The lower part of Nisqually Glacier fits snugly into its U-shaped valley. Exploring Nisqually Valley, we find Tato Falls tumbling over the steep valley wall. Upstream, beyond the falls, we see the front of the glacier. At first glance, it is hard to locate because it is covered with volcanic ash. The dark wet spot where moisture is seeping through is the actual front of the glacier. As the ice melts, it leaves behind many boulders which it has carried down the mountainside. From beneath the ice, a torrent of muddy glacial water carries its heavy load of finely ground rock. In the midday high water stage, boulders too are carried far downstream. The Nisqually River is like a silver thread as we look down from a high point. This enormous valley gives us an idea of the great moving power of ice. A glacier grinds and wears away the rock along its path. It digs or excavates a U-shaped valley with steep sides and a broad floor. Glaciers also build ridges and hills from the stones they gather and later set down again. For example, Emmons Glacier is a good builder of stony ridges. Here we find just such a ridge along the edge of the glacier. It is called a moraine. There are many kinds of moraines, but they are all made by glaciers depositing or setting down stones and gravel along their melting edges. The glaciers' rivers, too, deposit stones and gravel along their path. And now we shall explore the mountain meadow zone, which reaches down from the edges of everlasting snow to an elevation of 4,500 feet. This is a zone of lovely mountain flowers, graceful, slender trees, and beautiful mountain lakes. Gentle summer rain and melting snow, the rich volcanic soil, warm summer breezes, and the loving touch of sun. Together they give us meadows thickly covered with colorful blossoms. The avalanche lily is one of the first spring flowers. Spring comes late in the meadows, for the snow does not melt until late June and early July, and snow closes in again in September. The anemone prefers the sunny open spaces where the soft soil is warm, while the red heather grows in great clusters on the cool banks. Sunny blossoms of cinquefoil carpet the open spaces between Alaskan cedar and hemlock trees. Here the Canadian jay finds shelter. He's a greedy little fellow, always trying to stuff more into his beak than it can possibly hold. The friendly golden-mantled ground squirrel also makes his home in the meadowlands. He fills his cheek pouches with nuts and grain, scampers off to unload his loot, and bounds back again for more. Throughout the meadow zone, clear streams from melting snowbanks tumble over rocky ledges, reminding us of the plentiful moisture. No wonder the name Cascades, meaning waterfalls, was given to this range of mountains. In this life zone, we find slender but sturdy trees whose boughs sweep downward. Much of the heavy snow slips off their branches, and so they live through the winter unharmed. Along the marshy banks of the lakes and streams, we are likely to find Jeffrey's shooting star. Another which likes its feet cold and wet is the white marsh marigold. Its snowy white petals glisten against the deep green leaves. In contrast, the scarlet penstemon grows on the driest banks where the soil is warm. Near the lower edge of the meadow zone is the tall, showy bear grass. It is called bear grass because in the autumn, its bushy flower head becomes a mouthful of berries for Bruin, the big American black bear. He enjoys a fat ground squirrel or a fish now and then, or even a deer. He should be left alone, for he is not a friendly fellow. Now we leave behind the ice and snow, the flower fields and graceful trees. We shall go down to the lower elevations, down to the forest zone, where the valleys are velvet green. The forest zone reaches from the 4,500-foot elevation down to sea level. Spring comes early here. By the middle of July, the elderberries have ripened. The deer usually find their own food, but where people feed them, they become quite tame. Indeed, quite bold, especially when they can get tidbits. People should be careful, for the deer may strike out with their sharp front hoofs. Giant ferns and alder trees grow on the sunlit edge of the forest. In the twilight shade, deep in the forest, are smaller ferns and moss growing on decayed logs. Underfoot, there is a carpet of lichens, thick and soft and delightfully cool. The climate of the forest zone is ideal for the growth of big trees. The cool summers, the mild winters, plentiful moisture, and the rich volcanic soil, these are the reasons why we find the stately trees such as Douglas fir, spruce, and western hemlock. Out-of-door work is healthful in this mild climate. The big trees go to the markets of the world in the form of 1,000 products, all from the forest zone, and all because of the climate. In this brief visit to the Pacific Northwest, we have explored Mount Rainier, the old slumbering volcano, not only because of its famous glaciers and its lovely flower meadows, but also because of its interesting life zones. We have seen how the climate of western Washington has given us a region of great beauty and forests of great value.